Okay, streaming starts. Facebook on.
Hello everyone, I'm Lawrence Barth and I'm one of the directors of the Housing and Urbanism program at the graduate school at the Architectural Association, and we're here in London today to tell you a few things about our program for those who are interested perhaps in joining us. So the Housing and Urbanism program has been part of the heart of the graduate school, heart of the AA for 4 decades now. And we're very much at the center of activities here, but I suspect there's a lot of questions that you will all have. Now, I'm here today with two of my friends and colleagues. I have with me Nayara Vergara, who is one of our faculty, and I also have with me Zach Lawson, and later we'll introduce to you some of our other students. What I want to do today is to tell you a little bit about the program, and I want to tell you what it is that makes our program distinctive. I'd like to help you understand how the program is structured, and I want to let you know who we are, what kinds of students come and join our program, and finally to let you know something of the student experience that we have. Now the program is one where we have quite a generous relationship between students and faculty. We have 9 regular faculty members who are with students throughout the course. That is for a 12-month MA or 16-month MArch, you will be seeing all 9 of these tutors regularly every week. So I'm part of the senior leadership of the course, but we have working with us 6 others who are all involved in practice and bring with them a wealth of knowledge about the field of urbanism and the field of housing, and can help develop the understanding of the program. Now, what makes housing and urbanism distinctive? Well, first of all, we don't have a particular attitude about style. We don't have a particular attitude or about form or a formal preoccupation or a methodological one. What we're really most interested in is making sure that students have a very good understanding of what makes cities work, how people live in them, how changes are being developed in the world of work life. We want students to have a good understanding of the kinds of plans that are driving urban projects around the world, the sort of trends that are forcing shifts in the way in which projects become successful. We want students to be able to have a very critical and well-founded understanding of the field, and part of the way that we get there is that we ensure that students have a lot of opportunity to compare projects from around the world. So we not only look at European examples, but we're very clear to understand some of the challenges that students face or that cities face in other parts of the world. We want to make sure that students also understand that cities are about an everyday kind of life. So we go to some length to ensure that it's not just plans and not just forms that are discussed, but the challenges that cities face. We want students to be able to recognize what it is that is going to be driving change and introducing the sort of complexity that they'll have to deal with when they practice as urbanists. So if we look at the trends that are driving the knowledge economy today, that are driving change in the way in which cities work and how they develop, that gives us a chance to help students understand what they need to know to become more effective as architects practicing as urbanists. Now, the course is structured in 3 main components. On the left-hand side here, you'll see that we've got a list of courses, and I'll come back to those in a moment. On the right-hand side, you'll see that we have a series of design workshops and study trips, a particularly intensive international workshop that we run every year with host university and host cities elsewhere. And we also then, the third and main component of the course, all work leads toward a student dissertation, either for an MA or an MArch, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, if I focus on the courses, you can see here that we run through the first two terms, we run 6 courses, and these 6 courses form the foundation of a student's awareness of the history, the traditions of the field, current changes in the way in which economies are altering in the cities around the world. We also want to make sure that students spend a good part of their time in the library as well as the studio. So one of the things that actually makes our course quite distinctive is that we really bridge the gap between a good understanding of the history and traditions and literature of the field, as well as the design aspects of the field. But in order to do that effectively, we also need to allow students time to get out in the city and see the way in which the city is changing. And in that respect, London is a marvelous laboratory. So right around us, we have opportunity to observe the way in which workspaces are changing. We're finding new ways to bring living environments and office environments and making environments together. We teach students what the state of the art is in housing design, and so we focus a lot of our attention on understanding how housing becomes part of successful plans that we see emerging around the world. So we spend a lot of time understanding how plans work, who are the actors who will enable plans to become successful. And the key thing that we're trying to do is to help students understand how their design work will enable more effective collaboration to deliver outstanding examples of urban projects around the world today. So we spend time with our courses showing students how projects have been developed, what was the architectural content, who were the actors that enabled cities to effectively bring design together. And to do this, students have to understand how to draw in such a way that they will actually bring their own sort of skill and their own artistic talent, their own insight into the process that will support others in more effective building in the city. This also means that we need to show you something about the history of the field. So right down inside the heart of the program, we show you a lot of the trends that have driven previous shifts within the field of architecture and urbanism. So we take you inside the design thinking that led to new approaches within modernism, that developed different attitudes about housing that now create an opportunity for a much different kind of city today. Now, the third component I mentioned to you is our design workshop, our second component are the design workshops. We'll come to the thesis and dissertation work in a moment. The design workshops are something that run throughout the year. We begin with relatively simple exercises that bring the students together as teams in the autumn, progress towards more complex challenges where we take London as our laboratory. In taking London as our laboratory, we have a city where we have all different kinds of environments, from office environments, industrial environments, high-density environments, environments that are developing rapidly, others that remain in process for quite long periods of time. We see a city that has got almost every kind of condition available for students to observe. And so our design workshop allows students to take live challenges and work on them in such a way that they can bring to bear architectural reasoning and help and understand how architects participate, support a process in which political actors, investors, and others have to make challenging decisions. Now, this is throughout the year. We work in teams within the design workshop. We have very close tutorial relationship throughout the year. One of the things that we're always doing is trying to ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to push forward their ideas in the context where they use their drawing and their intellectual development to persuade others what might be the strongest approach both to design and to an urban strategy. And we work together very closely with faculty members who are involved in the field and are doing this as part of their job day in and day out. Now, I'd like to come to the third part of our program, and that's the dissertation, the design-based MA thesis, or the design-based MArch thesis. But before I do, I would like to give my student Zach Lawson a chance to describe some of his experiences in the way in which the design workshop relates to the thesis that he developed. But just to sort of set the scene for all of the thesis work that students do, they take an existing challenge within the city, for example, the transformation of a formerly industrial site. Students then begin to investigate how the interiors of some of those sheds or warehouses might be altered. But then they also start to ask the question, what can be added to this kind of environment that will genuinely transform it into an area where people can live and work effectively. So in the background of our program is always the opportunity to work on a live project and understand how design will help one address current trends. So Zach is going to talk a little bit about the way in which he worked on a project in Camden Town, which is a central city part of London, and then the lessons he learned from that work led on to some ideas for his current thesis project.
Absolutely. Hi everyone. So as Larry has just mentioned, within the city there's a series of urban conditions, and in the Term 2 workshop in Camden, we focused on this trend of a return to the city centre of living environments, but also collaborative environments, work environments, and really the centre of the city as a platform for us architects to engage in building robust social networks. And there's a series of values which are really driving the ambitions for these new residential and also work environments. Values such as collaboration, diversity, mobility, accessibility, convenience, and even learning. Parallel to this, the group which worked closely with Larry and also Anna Shapiro and Dominic Papa, in parallel to the living and working environments, we looked at neighbourhood institutions and service deliveries, looking specifically at supermarkets, health and wellbeing centres and schools, and started to explore investigated potential synergies and relationships within these service providers, but also within housing and also workspace environments. And so in doing so, we could fundamentally alter or explore these institutions, how they operated and how they delivered a service to a neighbourhood. And we explored this through a spatial understanding or spatial rethinking. And so when I say a rethinking spatially, a great precedent that comes to mind is the D. and Charles Wiley Theatre in Dallas. By rethinking the theatre as an open ground, open plain institution, by moving the front of house and the back of house to above and below house, it started to ask fundamental questions about how a theatre operated within the city. What would it begin to do outside of its traditional role? And it also extended to questions about how various programs might begin to relate with one another, also in a time scale, and also asked fundamental questions about funding models of that library and how operational costs might be covered. So really, a precinct like that begins to ask a series of complex questions which then we start to explore within a certain site. So in Camden, we specifically we began by challenging the idea of the Camden block. The Camden block, interestingly enough, is made up of a series of landowners, and it becomes extremely difficult to densify and also create buildings of value. And so, as I said, by challenging this block morphology, we began to ask questions. We began to try and demonstrate how possible transformations might begin to take place and how manageable they might be. So, by reorganizing the block, by exploring a series of different morphologies, we began to understand that if we opt for deeper floor plates, we could begin to create more diverse organizational types of floor plates, how then that might influence a series of different stakeholders to come into the building, begin to potentially create a very diverse range of tenants within the building, and then also how that then begins to inform a different collaborative workspace within the city of Camden.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the core of what led on to your arguments for the thesis, wasn't it? When you then switched over to the idea of a library that could be at the heart of a new kind of urban strategy for a neighborhood transformation.
Yeah. So by rethinking, a single building, you could also then begin to imagine or establish a vision for a wider area. And so my thesis begins to question the role of the library. So in recent decades, the library has become, in community environments, sort of hubs for education, health, entertainment, and study, whereas in corporate environments, becomes a place of collaborative and sort of diverse workspaces. So as well as understanding these and sort of the ascendancy of maker and the knowledge economy, really there's a series of new design questions, but also procurement challenges which begin to need to be addressed in a sort of a spatial manner. Yeah. And so that's what I'm exploring in my thesis, which is entitled Common Libraries.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Zach, thanks very much.
Thank you.
If we can have a look at what Zach has just described, he's described the way in which a series of lessons learned through engagement with a challenge that we see in London enables him to pose a design problem that he can work on through his thesis. Now, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the two different kinds of master's degrees we offer. We offer an MA that is a 12-month program, and we offer a Master of Architecture that is a 16-month program. Now, both of these place emphasis on an ability to understand the relationship between design and enabling the formation of successful cities. But the difference is that the MA is focused a little bit more upon the analysis of projects and lessons learned from elsewhere in the world and how they might become applicable to a challenge that a student may encounter in the future. The MArch, by contrast, is focused much more upon a comprehensive project where the emphasis will be less on the analysis and more on the development of the design. So it's really about design development, developing your design skills as a way of reasoning through a process. Now, these two different master's programs then enable us to have a fairly comprehensive approach to the development of new urbanists, architects and others who have some background in spatial design, and enabling them to become very proficient in the relationship between design and urban reasoning. Now, we're going to now ask the question, who are we? And in order to discuss that more, I'm going to ask Nayara to tell you a little bit more about the students who come into our program.
Yes, the question of who our students are. So the background of our students is very international. Any given year, about a third of our students come from Asia, another third comes from the Americas, and another third come from Europe or the Middle East. You've already seen the example of Zach, who was introduced earlier, that he's from Australia. And I would like to introduce two more students along this session. One of them is Simran. Simran is one of our students from this academic year, and she has been having the chance to learn about London as this design laboratory, but also she just came from the field, the unit trip, where they've been learning also about Berlin.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Simran, and we just, like you said, we came from Berlin a month ago, and the city was just so exciting. The first thing you notice when you arrive in the city is the infrastructure and its extensive public transport system. And then, we mostly explored the city on foot, and we got a better understanding that way of Berlin's famous and historical block structure. Not only that, we were guided by our own tutors and architects in the city, and we just, we discussed how the city's pattern and grain has evolved all over the years. I think the most important part of the trip was, getting to talk to the architects whose housing projects we actually got to study internally as well. And I think that was really helpful because we could relate it back to our design workshop back in London. But also on a personal note, just the chance to get to know the backgrounds of, my fellow classmates and, getting to learn their different skills and the cultural backgrounds they've come from. It's just one of the integral part of the AA education. So I think the trip was certainly a great learning experience.
And now you're applying all your knowledge, right,
Oh,
into
yeah,
your
no,
design
yeah.
workshop.
I mean, it's
the
the end term, and whatever we learn throughout the trip, it's definitely being used amongst ourselves and the students.
Great. Yeah, I mean, following to that, I would like to point out that the majority of our students are architects or hold a degree in architecture, but not all. We have had over the years outstanding students that actually could be coming from finance graduates, or they are geographers, or they are research anthropologists. So we have a very diverse sort of student core. We are looking for students that are curious and motivated and passionate about cities. And we want them to contribute to this outstanding design process and really contribute in to succeed in this design process where we are looking for live and work environments, and we're challenging how this has been changing over the years. I would like to introduce you to another student of us, Ellis. Ellis actually has graduated 2 years ago from our studio, and he already started working in the real world. So we want to share a little bit of how he learned from his thesis at the AA, and what was the challenges of his thesis that later on he could apply it in the real life. Hi, Ellis.
Hi, everyone.
And in fact, one other thing that I would like to say about Ellis is that he, in fact, joined our teaching team this last year on our study trip abroad. So last year we went to work with the city of Bogota and the Universidad de los Andes, and Ellis was a key part of our team then in that project. We'll be going back there again this year, in fact, and so I'm sure Ellis will have another chance to join us. But anyway, Ellis, we were hoping you would tell us a bit about your thesis.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hi everyone. I think, I will give a short summary. I think the whole experience has been fantastic since I came to London. And I think the way this program showed me how to experience the city and experience what is architecture in relation to the city is unique. And basically, I can tell you, I have to talk about my thesis. and I have a very funny story about that, because everything started with an article on the newspaper. So basically, my thesis is about how industrial landscapes are changing and how can they may interact with housing and even the knowledge city, which is one of the things that we explore quite in detail in our program. So, I come from Mexico City, and actually I was trying to do my thesis in Mexico, but as Larry mentioned, this program shows London as a lab. And the good thing about this lab is that you can use this knowledge and put it all over the world, because we learn from cities like London, and Europe, that especially Berlin as well, and Switzerland, how can we use this methodology, how the trends are moving, how societies are moving, and how technology is moving. And basically, all this exploration was based in Park Royal here in London, which is the largest industrial estate. And the good thing about this place is the proximity and connectivity with the city center. So the main question was like, how can we retain employment in the city center? Instead of, what in the last century we did, we separated the uses. The industrial land went outside of the city, but now we live in a new area where these kind of elements can have direct synergies and can contribute to a new kind of societies. So you can see by the use of different drawings, we start to explore the conditions of the area. And actually, this kind of industrial conditions are repeated all over UK. So you can see how Park Royal had a very unique context, but then you can go to Leeds and apply the same conditions. So you can see how, what you're looking at now is drawings about the canal and how probably that was a main way to connect goods between the city and the industrial state, but now it's changing over time. And now these kind of environments are completely transforming into residential units, or environments that we can see even in King's Cross in central London.
And in a way, what you're doing here is looking at an environment that looks very chaotic, and you're finding a way to see it as a regular pattern and grain that can be worked with in design terms.
And it's, in fact, it's really interesting how you mentioned the library in the previous, because you have to go back in time to see how these housing typologies can shape the industrial landscape, because these industrial landscapes, they don't have any value at all. They are very messy, but how looking to the right typology can develop different kind of environments and can bring people to those industrial areas. So, the problem with the industrial landlords is like they want to completely change the use of that into either housing or industrial, but now we can see with these drawings that a possible synergy can be developed.
Yeah. And in a way, what you began to do is to think about the way in which living and working are coming so close together that a robotics site could be a key part of a new residential neighborhood. And this allows us to think differently about the kinds of collaborators that will come along and really build up a new kind of city in areas that we used to think had only one sort of use.
That's right. Yeah. And actually we can see how the landscape, sometimes we talk about a lot the public realm, and what we see the public realm only as leisure. But I think this kind of thesis explores a different way. How can we approach to the public realm? It's a place of knowledge, it's a place of spontaneous events that can change our everyday life. So you can see the last drawing is what happened in the interior of your apartment. Probably it will look a little bit messy, but I think it's very dynamic. And one of the things that we want to bring to these industrial areas is vitality, intensity, and a 24/7 use, which is really hard to achieve. We have examples like Stratford, East Village, where it's dead. So it will change over time, but we need this kind of explorations on how to activate and bring more to our cities.
I mean, I think one of the common aspects of this thesis that you and Zach are developing is a multi-scalar approach to our cities, where we are looking at the vision of what's happening in a very large scale, but at the end you also have images of what happens in the room. And I think the articulation of all these multi-scalar relationships is very enriching and is very challenging as well through the process.
Yeah, and it's very challenging. And now, well, you mentioned I'm already in the real life, if I can say it like that. But you can see how all these explorations that we have the time to do it. Now private investors are looking for that. They are really completely changing the way of thinking. They don't want the traditional product because families are not interested in that, or young professionals like us. They want to move over to more exciting environments where they can live and develop and can create a community, a sense of community, which is really hard for new kind of housing developments over the city.
Yeah.
Well, I've noticed that there are a couple of questions that have come in from some of our participants online. One of the questions is, can they apply without an architecture degree as an undergraduate? Yes, as Nayara has mentioned, we do have applicants that come with other degrees. What we're looking for, though, are students who will nevertheless have an interest in and a curiosity about cities and their design, and an ability to develop some kind of design attitude and understanding. That doesn't necessarily mean that one has been trained as an architect. However, most of our students are architects, but we can certainly accommodate students with other degree programs in their background. Now, another question that has come in is what are my career prospects after I complete this program? And I think that's a very interesting question, since we actually have Ellis right here. So Ellis is now in his second, is working with his second practice after having left our program. But perhaps you'd say something about why you were able to get your first job, and then what led you to think that that wasn't enough and wanted a different practice for your second one.
Well, actually, it was very interesting. And I think the key point was the interview that I had with my previous practice. And I think the interview where I explained my whole thesis in 1 hour. So it was 1 hour interview, quite exhausting. But they can really tell how you understand London and UK, because basically the two practices are one of the top 10 in UK. So you can see that they are very interested in this kind of background that you may have about the city, how you understand the city, how do you know the different areas. And basically I had the opportunity to work in two different sectors, which is the business space and housing. And what this program brings you is that you will be very flexible. It's like you won't only work in housing, you will be able to shift around business space. As you can see from different MArch theses, we explore a lot about employment, because the city is about employment, it's about production of goods, but as well living on them, between them. So I think that interview gave me they were really excited about drawings. I think one of the things that I really developed in this project was the way to express, how to express myself in terms of drawings. Well, the first 2 months were quite challenging, studying it, but then you see the reward of that. And then they're very interested how in few diagrams you can express your idea and how you understand the different scales, the multi-scalarity that you were talking about. And my experience in the first practice was basically business space, and one of the very interesting facts is like in our workshops we studied about connectivity between different cities, and now in London it's happening in the HS2. And I will bring people from Leeds to London in about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and you can see how I explored the first 2 months, and as well in my thesis, because it's a background of my thesis. But you can see now how clients are moving to invest on those kind of different economies. So I think, and then, well, I was a little bit tired of business space, and then I switched to housing, and in my second interview, I presented my whole thesis once again, and the director was really excited, telling me like, okay, you really understand, you really get it, you don't have to spend 3 hours explaining your main points, you really get your idea. And one of the things that this program gave to me, it was just to summarize. Don't to talk a lot, just go straight to the point. And I'm very happy about that.
Nice, very nice.
Well, I think we're nearly at the end of our time, but I would like to encourage any of you who have an interest in our program and would like to join us. Applications are now open, and we are certainly very happy to answer any additional questions you might have. We have a really great admissions department, and they can also answer most of the questions you might have. And if you want further information in the detail of our program, you can write to us directly in Housing and Urbanism. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a very nice opportunity to get together and share with you our program. Thanks very much.
Thank you.